Welcome to the Beau Show. Not long ago, I met Roger Stone, the very well-known political strategist and consultant who has worked on numerous Republican presidential campaigns, from Nixon to Reagan to Trump. He's been a friend of Donald Trump's for a long time and tried to get him to run for president well before he actually did. Those of you who watch the news know that the FBI raided his home in 2019 and arrested him on 7 charges from the Mueller investigation. Stone was sentenced to 40 months in federal prison, but his sentence was commuted by Trump just days before his jail time was to start. Now Stone can speak freely about what happened to him because he has a lot to say, and I think you will enjoy this. Here's my exclusive with Roger Stone. Roger, first of all, thank you so much for sitting down with me today and taking time out of your schedule. I want people to just get to know you as if they don't know you, and how you got interested in politics.
Well, of course, when I was very young, I wanted to be an actor. And I came from a blue-collar, working-class Catholic family. My parents realized that if I leaned back on my skills as an actor, I would starve to death. Of course, they wanted me to become an electrician or a plumber or some other tradesman because, as my father would say, those guys make good money. At some point, I realized that politics was show business for ugly people. It is specific that the woman who lived next door to us was active in the Women's Republican Club, gave me a copy of Barry Goldwater's book, The Conscience of a Conservative, and I devoured it. And from that moment on, I knew that this is what I wanted to do, i.e., I identified with Goldwater's message of personal responsibility, limited government, strong national defense, low taxes. It resonated with me in a way that nothing else had. And I was always interested not so much in the candidacy side of politics, but in the operational side of it, the mechanical side of it, if you will. So I was brought into the movement by Goldwater, as so many were. That leads you a natural progression from Goldwater to Nixon, to Reagan, to Trump. It's the same voter coalition that elected all of them. It is the same combination of traditional Republicans and working class Democrats. Now, the only difference is that with Trump, you have an increasing number of African Americans and Hispanics that you add to your coalition. So that's really what got me started in politics and brought me to the point where I'm a veteran of 11 national presidential campaigns, scores of campaigns for governor and senator and congressman. It's in my blood. I really don't know how to do anything else. If I'm not doing it, I want to write about it and I want to talk about it. So that's why we are where we are today.
Well, I actually read that before you read Conscience of a Conservative, that your first political trick was telling kids in the cafeteria line that Richard Nixon wanted to have school on Saturdays. Is that true?
Because I came from a Catholic family, although my parents were Republicans and my grandparents were Republicans, I think my parents were conflicted. They didn't talk about it much. I suspect my mother voted for John Kennedy. And it's true that in the second grade, I wanted to effect a mock election in my elementary school. Now, I grew up in a suburb in Connecticut where it was very clear that Nixon would win the election. It was a Republican area. So I stood in the cafeteria line, and as each kid went by, I told them, if Nixon is elected, there'll be school on Saturdays. And of course, the following day, John Kennedy swept the mock election in my elementary school, and I attributed this to my first experience with disinformation. Of course, I've never used it since then.
You've been called a renowned infighter, a mendacious windbag, a seasoned practitioner of hard-edged politics, a political fixer, and a dirty trickster. What would you call yourself?
I would call myself a political activist, a libertarian, a truth teller. That'll get you banned on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and so on. I've been called a lot worse than all those things, so it doesn't too much bother me. What really bothers me, however, is being called a convicted felon because I received a full presidential pardon after being framed in a politically motivated prosecution, largely because I refused to testify falsely against President Trump. As you know, I was subjected to a Soviet-style show trial in Washington, D.C., a trial that featured an epically biased judge who couldn't really hide her hatred for President Trump or for me. A jury forewoman was attacking me on Facebook and Twitter in 2019. And then regarding the very case in which she would later be selected as a juror. Of course, the judge ruled that that wasn't evidence of bias. Prosecutors who withheld exculpatory material. Mueller's final report, only disgorged at the order of a federal judge, admitted that he had, quote, no factual evidence, close quote, against me regarding Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, and so on. So anytime you read a press report that begins by saying convicted felon Roger Stone, you can either turn it off or just click off of it because it's, of course, no longer true.
So of the charges that you had, which were obstructing an official proceeding, making false statements, and witness tampering, do you think you're guilty of any of those?
No, actually not. First of all, you can't lie about something that didn't happen. So I specifically am charged with lying about Russian collusion. And the judge says I lied to cover up for Donald Trump. What exactly would I have been covering up? If there was no Russian collusion, then I had no motive. The witness tampering is just thrown in there to make me sound more nefarious. It's kind of interesting. So a grand jury witness in my case who went to the grand jury and who was told by the government's principal witness, Randy Credico, that if he testified contrary to Credico's testimony to the grand jury, that he would be shot in the head. He was not charged with witness tampering, but because there's an email in which I threatened to take Credico's dog because the dog was being neglected and not fed, they chalked that up to witness tampering. No, Andrew Weissman, the epically corrupt prosecutor in my case, the guy who covered up mob murders back in New York, the guy who destroyed Enron, that case was reversed by the Supreme Court, but he destroyed lives and the company and Arthur Anderson, their accountant, and who also in the Mueller investigation erased the memories of 31 cell phone calls during the Durham investigation. He put together a very clever indictment against me in which I'm charged not with Russian collusion, but with lying about Russian collusion. Well, one cannot lie about something that didn't exist, and I certainly didn't impede their official inquiry. Chairman Nunes says I didn't. His chief counsel says I didn't. Only the Democrats on the committee, Adam Schiff, Russian spy collaborator Eric Swalwell, who, by the way, is still on the House Intelligence Committee, still has access to classified information, despite his dalliance with a Chinese spy, a communist Chinese spy. They claimed that I had impeded an official investigation. In fact, when the House turned over my testimony to Mueller, it was with no recommendation. So they didn't claim that I had impeded an investigation. It was a frame job. And the purpose of it became clear in July of 2019 when my lawyer was called in and told that if I did not cooperate, if I didn't remember and testify that some 26 cell phone messages or cell phone calls between candidate Trump and myself had actually pertained to the Russians and WikiLeaks and so on, that they would file superseding charges against me and I would die in prison. So the bottom line of it was I was indicted to pressure me into bearing false witness against the president, and I refused to do that. And then, thank God, through the grace of Jesus Christ, President Trump had the wisdom and the strength and the courage in an election year to not only commute my sentence hours before I was to report to a COVID-19 infested prison, but then the following Christmas to issue me an unconditional pardon.
But you had a back channel to WikiLeaks, correct?
Not really. I had a source.
Okay.
So
who's an intermediary between you and Julian?
Somebody who I believed was in touch with one of the WikiLeaks attorneys.
Okay.
I could prove that. My lawyers should have proved it at trial, but my lawyers chose to mount no defense whatsoever. I'm still kind of sore about that. I'm not really sure why I broke my back to raise $3.5 million to pay them, because they essentially offered no defense whatsoever. There was an attorney who testified at my trial who very clearly was working for WikiLeaks, who very clearly was the source of the only information I had that was of any value, which was that WikiLeaks did have devastating information on Hillary, and they would release it in October, all of which, of course, was true. Now, you can call that a source or a back channel or an intermediary. You can call it whatever you want. It's not illegal. The rest of what I would post on a regular basis came from public sources. All you had to do was put in a Google search, news search under Julian Assange and read what he was saying to a disparate number of publications and other news outlets, some of them pretty obscure, and then repost that stuff. No, my indictment was extraordinarily clever, except for it didn't work. First of all, I didn't testify against Donald Trump as they wanted me to, which would have been lying, nor am I 6 feet under. So I'm still here, and now Mr. Durham confirms everything that I said. So it leads me to this question. Since I believe I am still suffering damages, I still get death threats, my family still gets death threats, I continue to lose employment opportunities, I'm prepared to file a class action suit against Hillary Clinton and John Podesta and Michael Sussman and others. One of the flaws in our system is you can't sue the government. You can't sue the prosecutors. You can't sue the FBI. They're immune from lawsuit, no matter how corrupt, no matter how dishonest they are. They're immune from lawsuit. So your only potential action here, other than a defamation action, which is extraordinarily difficult to prove under the current New York Times versus Sullivan standard. So unfortunately, people can go out and say Roger Stone is a Russian agent. Roger Stone was the intermediary between Russian intelligence and WikiLeaks and Trump, none of which is true. It'd be very hard for me to win, as Sarah Palin recently found out. Therefore, I do think I can bring a class action suit because I have ongoing damages.